Hey, I'm Amanda from Trifecta Fitness. We're proud to be Clarksville's new Get Fit headquarters. Trifecta Fitness is a state-of-the-art spin and strength training studio. Our spin studio is truly one of a kind in this area, complete with 20 state-of-the-art live fitness bikes and an incredible sound system. Our strength training is done in small groups of 6 or fewer, and all of our strength and spin classes are scalable for every level of experience. Come see us in the heart of Clarksville, just behind MAPCO at the corner of Old Trenton Road and Wilma Rudolph Boulevard. Call us for more info at 931-542-6265 or download our Trifecta Fitness app for a full list of upcoming classes.
In October 2019, Arlington, Texas was chosen to be the home of a new national museum, unlike any other. The National Medal of Honor Museum will be a unique home of military history. The 100,000 square foot museum will house exhibits, archives, and artifacts relating to the 3,500 U.S. troops who have been awarded the medal, the nation's highest honor for valor in combat. The museum will have 31,000 square feet of galleries dedicated to U.S. troops who have received the award. The museum CEO, former Navy SEAL and NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy, said the museum will focus on education as much as preservation. The building will have 5 areas dedicated to Medal of Honor winners from the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard. The main gallery will be located in a central plaza under a 25,000 square foot slab of steel, which will appear to be suspended in midair. It will be supported by 5 pillars. Black Rifle Coffee is a corporate sponsor of the museum, as are the Dallas Cowboys. The museum's board also includes over a dozen major corporations and 6 Medal of Honor recipients, including David Bellavia, Patrick Brady, and Britt Slabinski. Army Staff Sergeant Bellavia was awarded the medal for clearing an entire house by himself on November 10, 2004, as a squad leader in support of Operation Phantom Fury in Fallujah, Iraq. He killed 4 enemy fighters and wounded a 5th in close quarters battle. Army Major General Brady flew and coordinated the evacuation of 51 seriously wounded men during a firefight in Vietnam in January 1968. Slabinski, a Navy SEAL chief and team leader, led a rescue team of SEALs during Operation Anaconda in Afghanistan in March 2002. Slabinski and his team flew to a mountaintop ambush site to rescue Petty Officer First Class Neil Roberts, who had fallen from the back of a helicopter. Slabinski led the team through almost constant combat against an entrenched Taliban force. Along with the board members, former presidents Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama serve as honorary directors. The museum is expected to open.
All right. Welcome back. MisFitNation. The MisFitNation show. We are a show founded by a veteran and hosted by 2 veterans and a military spouse. Our mission is to get people to tell their stories to the world. If you're an author, share your tips with the Misfit Nation. If you're a musician or an actor, our audience needs to know how they too can get into the business. Coaches, we love our coaches. Come on and share your tips with the Misfit Nation to help them become better versions of themselves. If you are a corporate leader or an entrepreneur, come on and show how you did it and how hard you have fought for success. If you are a veteran, first responder, or Gold Star family, we would love to have you come on and share your story with the Misfit Nation. We always have time for you. If you're feeling down, alone, or starting to see the darkness, stop. Think about those who are around you. You are not alone. You will be missed. If you feel like your problems will be a burden to those in your inner circle or feel embarrassed, dial 988. If you are a veteran, take option 1. We need you to keep pushing forward. Don't make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you are a new listener, welcome to the Misfit Nation show. Be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast app. Also on our YouTube channel at @the_MisFitNation. Subscribe and click the bell to keep you up to date on our latest episodes and all of our news. You can also find us on Heroes Media Group and About Face Radio. Now, let's get to the show!
All right. Welcome back to this Sunday episode of the MisFitNation show. Thank you for taking some of your time tonight to hang out with us. I know you can be doing anything else in the world. You can choose any other airline to fly on or podcast to listen to, but we are here for you tonight. Tonight we have a great guest, but before we get to him, of course, we have to pay homage to another law enforcement professional who lost his life this week. U.S. Army veteran Sergeant Rick Finley of the McNairy County Sheriff's Office in Selmer, Tennessee. His end of watch was yesterday, Saturday, December 14th, 2024. So please keep him, his friends, his family, all his peers in your thoughts and prayers, as not only is this a hard time, it's a hard time of year for this to happen, of course, as well, with the holidays just a week or so away. Keep them in your thoughts and prayers, and let's try to make it through the rest of the year without using hate to fuel your way through life, and do the right thing out there. So our next guest actually is from that world. He served for 25 years as a Milwaukee police officer, retired as a police sergeant in Milwaukee. He supervised various special units and investigated major felonies. He's the author of 10 books, including his upcoming thriller, The Good Collar. He hosts the popular Cops and Writers podcast and runs a 7,500 member Facebook group for crime writers. He has also hosted true crime television documentaries and consulted with crime writers for their books and screenplays. So without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Patrick O'Donnell to the MisFitNation show. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's awesome to have you here, and it's great to connect with you. And even though I could have connected you probably when you went to Nashville, since you were down there for a conference down there, not far from where we are here. But we are here now. We're on the interwebs now, talking to each other. And thanks a lot for taking your time to hang out with us, and on a Sunday night as well.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much.
I gave a short introduction about you, Patrick. If you don't mind, tell the MisFitNation as much as you want to tell us, or as far back as you want to go, to how we got here.
All right. I was born on the south side of Chicago, and my heart is still in Chicago. I've moved around, but we were joking before you hit record. I'm a diehard Bears fan. Unfortunately for me, living in Wisconsin with all these Green Bay people, the Bears have a lot on their plate, but I'm eternally hopeful and optimistic that next year will be our year. It'll happen. It's gotta happen, right?
You, brother. I'm with you.
Yeah. So, like I said, I was born on the south side of Chicago. Both mom and dad are Irish immigrants, so I am first generation American. My mom and dad were incredibly hard workers. They both came from a village in Ireland where there was no plumbing or electricity. They started with absolutely nothing. My mom came over when she was 12. My dad came over when he was 19. They were actually born in the same little village, and they reconnected later as adults. Their families knew each other. So we could do another story on that. Tears with that. So, like I said, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, moved north, and we wound up in Wisconsin, rural Wisconsin. Town, 10 people. They didn't even have a McDonald's.
Oh, wow.
I'm a teenager, and I'm just like, what the hell? Where did you take me, Dad? Yeah, this is crazy.
Child abuse.
So I acclimated, and I wound up going to college in a little state college about 10 miles from where we lived. It was University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. I started as a music major because I just love music. I've been playing saxophone for a long time, and I wanted to be a high school band teacher. I thought that was kind of cool. And what I did was I was working 2 jobs before I went to college. I took a gap year, and my gap year was working 2 full-time jobs and living at home to save up enough money for school. Nothing fun, that's for sure. I know people have like cool gap stories. I do not. And I dropped one of the full-time jobs, and I stayed in. I went to college, and I worked a full-time job while I was going to college. I don't recommend that for anybody. That was kind of crazy. And music just didn't work anymore because there was a lot of like little 1 or 2 credit classes that were 5 days a week. And to tell you the truth, I really didn't mesh with the people in music because here I am, I just got done unloading trucks for 8 hours, or I'm about to go unload trucks, or, whatever. And I'm in my work clothes and they're all wearing all the goth stuff. And they're all wearing black like they're going to a funeral or something. I'm like, why are you so depressed? I think I was the only one that had like a real job out of anybody that I went to school with. And I'm like, all right, well, whatever. So I switched over to sociology, and my minor was criminal justice. I did an internship my junior year with the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department, and I was hooked. I always had an interest in police work, but I tell you what, once you're boots on the ground and you're actually like there with the men and women that were doing the job, I'm in a big city. I'm like, oh, I got to do this for a living. This is awesome. So I graduated from college, and unfortunately with the sociology degree, I was qualified to be a restaurant manager, a bartender, a car salesman. I did that. I bounced around from job to job until I got hired by the City of Milwaukee Police Department. And just to give you an idea how much competition there was, I think there was about 3,500 people there for the written test.
Wow.
When I was on the waiting list for 4 years. So, I mean, it's completely different now. Now they're begging people to become cops. But back then, everybody wanted to be one. It was a highly sought after profession.
Definitely. 25 years ago, definitely was a highly sought after profession. And it wasn't frowned upon to be a police officer, law enforcement professional. So kudos to you to starting then, and you've seen the transition throughout. So I'll let you continue now.
Yeah. So what happened was I had a great career. I mean, I spent 25 years in the city of Milwaukee. I was in patrol the entire time. I worked nights for 17 years out of my 25. And I promoted to sergeant after I had just a hair under 7 years on the job.
Wow.
So I finished at sergeant because I thought that was like the best job ever on the department, because you had 1 foot with the guys and gals on the street and the other foot was in management, and you were kind of the buffer between the lieutenant or the captain and the working cops, the ones that actually did the police work. And, in being a sergeant, I thought it was the best job in the world because I could some things I could pick and choose where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And in other ways, it's like you had to go to every dead body. You had to go to every homicide. You had to go to every shooting, every fire. The only thing I didn't go to was a plane crash. There was like a list of like 20 things that you're required to do. And to me, I thought that was awesome. And I could help out my cops, not in like a nefarious, like illegal way or anything like that. But you know what? I could tell if somebody's having a bad day, they're having problems at home. And I wound up being a supervisor. I think that, they could come to me and it's like, all right, what's going on? Let's get through this. Or if they're having a hard time, so again, I could be of service to the community and I could be of service to my cops. So I thought that was the best job ever. I got into writing almost accidentally. I wrote a book about how to buy a car.
Wow.
But the great thing about that was I learned how to do it myself. It's just when Amazon started, it's like you could self-publish a book. I didn't know you could do that. I thought you had to get an agent, you had to go to New York. I thought, et cetera, get rejected a gazillion times. And then maybe kind of sort of you get a shot, but those days are gone.
Right.
Yeah, publishing has changed quite dramatically actually in the last 10 years. It's still changing. And I wrote a couple of books under pen names, and then I got picked up by a mid-level publishing house that was a hybrid publisher, and I'm getting ready to release my latest book that I'm doing by myself called The Good Collar. So I'll back up just a little bit. I wrote 2 books on police procedure for writers. I started going to writers conferences, and inevitably I would have writers coming up to me and say, "Oh, you're that police guy, right?" And I didn't have a t-shirt on. I didn't have a sandwich board. I didn't have neon signs or anything, but it's inevitable. People are going to find out. But they were asking very respectfully, would my character need a search warrant for this? What would happen if this guy is shot? What about this gun? Because a lot of these people never even have handled a gun before. So they were asking very good questions, etc. And somebody that knows a lot more about this business than I do said, you should really write a couple of books helping out authors, because you've got one foot in the author community, and your other foot, I was still an active, police sergeant. And he said, you got all kinds of credibility. So I wrote 2 books called Writers, and it was specifically for crime writers. I started a Facebook group. It was me, my editor, and a couple of buddies. And now it's 7,500 people with literally from all over the world. And then I started a podcast to promote the books, and that took off. That grew feet. And I'm like, wow, I didn't expect that. And so it's just, yeah. And then, I've been picked up for a couple of TV documentaries to be a consultant on that. And all of a sudden now, I'm behind a camera, and I'm just like, wow, that's different. So I've had a lot of fun. This has been a blast.
You're definitely on a pretty good roller coaster. And
oh yeah,
you have seen both sides of the badge from that perspective as well. During
Absolutely.
your 25 years as a police officer, most of that as a sergeant, actually.
Yes.
What was the most thrilling thing you did as a police officer? Most thrilling thing you had to respond to?
Not to sound like braggadocious or anything like that, but I've responded to hundreds and hundreds of homicides, chasing armed robbery suspects, homicide suspects. And that doesn't make me unique in any way, shape, or form. Big city USA, that's just the way it is. And when I was on the job, we were pretty much unrestricted when it came to squad pursuits.
Okay.
So, I'll give you an example. My first week on the job, I'm with my field training officer, and we get called to a stabbing at 7:00 in the morning. We're a midnight to 8 car, and it's like, all right, well, whatever. We're not going home on time. So we roll up, and they give a description of the stabber, and it's like a black male, white t-shirt, black jeans, running northbound on 12th Street. Okay. So we're cruising up there, and we're in a fully marked wagon. It's a huge van that says Milwaukee Police all over it. It's got red and blue lights, etc. And sure as shit, here comes a dude with a knife running towards us.
Oh, man.
Covered in blood. And we're like, okay. So I hop out, I draw down on the guy, and our eyes just lock, and I'm like, yeah, get down, drop the knife, blah, blah, blah. And follows all my hands, goes face plants on the sidewalk. My FTO hooks him up, he handcuffs him, we put him in the back of the squad. And my FTO, that's my field training officer, he looks at me and says, just so you know, usually they're running the other direction when they see us. They're not running towards us. They're running away from us. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I'm like, fair enough. This guy was just in shock because he just stabbed his best friend who was a poker game gone wrong.
Wow.
And I'm the new guy. So they're like, hop in the ambulance. It's a load and go. This guy ain't doing good. His blood pressure is dropping like a rock. I get in the ambulance, and the paramedics, they have an IV in each arm, and they're pumping on the saline. And I'm like, well, I'm no doctor, but I know that's not a good sign. And, my FTO is like, get a dying declaration. This guy probably isn't going to make it. We went over dying declarations one time when I was in the academy. I'm like, I'm not even sure what it is. Again, this is my first week on the street. And I'm like, okay. So, there's an army of paramedics working on this poor guy. And I'm like, sir, you're gonna die. Who killed you? We know who did it, but just to solidify the case more or less. It's like, who killed you? And this guy's looking at me all like crazy eyed. He couldn't talk because he was just gurgling more than anything else. And then eventually they put an airway in, so he couldn't talk anyways. So we wind up going into the trauma room. And anybody that's ever gone to like I think it's a level 1 or level 4, I forget, whichever the highest level is. Like if the president's in town, and they get shot, that's where they go. So it's a small just army of doctors, nurses, techs. I mean, it's amazing. There's like 10 people working on this one guy. And the head doctor, he gets a little break in the action. I pull him off to the side, and I'm like, hey, is this guy going to live? And he says, he'll live. He said, if it was you or I, we'd be dead. This guy's going to live to be 100. And as soon as he says that, boo, flatline.
Oh, wow.
So they work on him. They bring him back. He flatlined 3 times. And then the last time he flatlines, the main doc grabs a scalpel, opens up his chest, breaks the ribs, and starts doing open heart massage. And I'm like maybe 15 feet away. And I'm like, okay. So unfortunately, this guy expires. What happened was he was stabbed in a pulmonary artery. He stabbed in the armpit. Terrible place to get shot or stabbed. That's all kinds of bad juju there. So he expires, and I'm looking, and like the nurses are in the ambulance bay, and there's a couple of them. Back then everybody smoked. They're grabbing black coffee and cigarettes as their breakfast, and they're just puffing away, and a couple of them were just bawling, and you're just like, wow, and these are like battle toughened, hardened, nurses, and I'm like, wow, this is pretty profound. And I go back in the room, then here come the homicide detectives, and then the CSI people taking all kinds of pictures, and we go back, and my FDO is like, well, we're gonna have to write a lot of reports, and I'm like, okay. So I didn't get done that day probably till about, I don't know, 6 o'clock at night. And I came home and I was just like, all right, I almost shot and killed somebody. I almost got stabbed, and I watched somebody die, and I just saw the innards of somebody. That I was just like, this is all in one shift from one incident. And that kind of set the tone for my career. Now, obviously every day wasn't that, but I've seen some crazy, crazy stuff. But yeah, that was the start.
That's an authentic and auspicious start at the same time.
Yes.
To just come out the academy and have that go on right away, and then still stay on the job for 24 plus 12 months after, 11 and a half months later. After that, a lot of cops wouldn't stay on after that being their first really big thing to do. How did you deal with that and say, I'm going to grit this out and stay for a whole career?
Well, I thought to myself, this is the best job ever. I mean, I don't want to disrespect, victims or victims' families of any type of crime, but I thought, I was like, wow, they're paying me to do this. I mean, this is stuff that you see in movies and TV, and you're just like, and I'm actually doing it. It was nothing short of incredible. But eventually it does catch up to you. I mean, I remember one time, I was at District 5 as a copper, and I went, I think it was 2 weeks. I either had a shooting, or I had a shooting victim, or a homicide every day for like 2 weeks. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just getting burnt out. This is crazy. And I asked my boss, I said, could I be Booker tonight? Which means, you're not going to be on the street when people bring in arrests. You're the one who, searches them and processes them, and you're in charge of the cell block. And it's kind of a break, unless somebody's fighting with you or whatever, you're spitting on you or whatever. But for the most part, it's low stress. So yeah, my boss was like, yeah, sure, no problem. So it was a slow night, and this is before internet, before smartphones, before any of that stuff. You brought magazines or a book with you, or you had like a little transistor radio. And what happened was, I'm just hanging out. I had like maybe only 2 or 3 prisoners in back that I had to keep an eye on. And all of a sudden, I hear somebody just laying on the horn right by my window in the booking room. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Well, that's where all the squads were parked. It was a squad parking lot, and we had our own gas pump. And here's this big old hoopty that's, like 10, it's like a land barge. And this kid is just laying on the horn. And I'm just like, I come out there, and I didn't have a gun. I didn't have anything, or a radio. I just went out there because I was pissed. Dude, this ain't Amoco. This ain't no full service gas station. I said, hey, hit the bricks. And he's like, man, I've been shot. And I'm just like, now we're doing drive-through shootings. Sure enough, most of his knee was gone. I'm amazed. It was his left knee. He got shot with a shotgun, point blank range in his leg. And he crawled to his car and drove to the station. Now, this station was like in the middle of the inner city, the middle of like a very, very, rough part of town. And I'm just like, I can't escape it. They're coming to me now. And I'm like, oh my God.
That's amazing right there. Wow. And you try to take a break and they still come to you and you still stayed on
Yes.
for a career. How many people stayed with you the whole time, like from academy through? Was there a lot of your classmates that stayed through to retirement, or no? It was just like the ones.
That's a good question, because my academy class was 43. 2 people washed out. So, we're down to 41. And as far as making it 25 years, maybe 10 people,
Wow.
maybe. And not all, like, I don't want to do police work anymore or anything like that. Some of them, turned federal or went to state agencies.
Right.
You could go, once you got some experience under your belt, especially in a big city like that, you're pretty marketable. You're very marketable because you've done a lot of stuff and seen a lot of stuff.
You're in a training ground, really, when you're in the big city. You get to see every aspect of police work when you're in a big city.
Absolutely. So yeah, probably about 10 of us made it through. I'm sorry, what?
I said that, and you get paid to do it as well. You get paid to get trained while learning your job.
Yes, absolutely. I thought it was great.
Yeah. So it's amazing right there. We already got a couple questions in the chat coming in here. Let's see what this first one says. At A to the LO on X, what's the most challenging aspect of balancing gritty police realism with compelling fiction in your books?
That's a great question. My latest book is on the dark side. The 4 books I wrote before that were kind of like Hill Street Blues, but modern day, where, I took people through the nuts and bolts of police work, etc. But I didn't have a like super gritty. This is. So I'm more or less experimenting to see if it's too dark, or the reactions I've gotten so far is people really like it. There is a market for the John Wicks, the Dexters, etc. There is a market where people, like the true story. They want to hear like how it actually happens.
And I think now, if you compare nowadays to when you first started as a police officer, people are more welcoming to that style of writing now than they were back then, or that style of any entertainment, as opposed to when they were back then. So it should, I believe it'll actually work a little more now than it would have anywhere during your career.
Well, it's a pendulum. It goes back and forth. You're always going to have, a base core of people that will like certain genres. Mine's, vigilante justice. There's always going to be a for that. But, hopefully I get picked up, for options for movies and, films and that kind of thing. If that happens, and that's Hollywood's a pendulum. They're fickle. One day it's one thing and another day it's another. But, you look at Jack Carr, he got Terminal List, approved. He's going into his 2nd season with that. And I had him on my podcast, and he was like, I never thought in 100 years they would have picked up the 1st season. I was in shock that Hollywood said this is okay. And, look what happened. It blew up.
It sure did. And I believe, like you said, the pendulum swings. It just depends on what is promoted more within the greater media scheme. So what they're pushing forward is what's going to get sold. And I think you're in the right genre right now and the right writing style to let it take off at this time than it would have been in the past, or maybe in 4 years from now.
Yeah, you're right. Who knows? It's a lot of it's timing, and it's like, yeah, we'll see how it goes.
We got one from Mac Cheese, I guess, C33Z. What do you think is the biggest misconception authors have about law enforcement that you aim to correct through your consulting and in the Facebook group?
There's a whole bucket load of misconceptions, I'll say, but some of the biggest ones are either you'll have the lone detective that is trying to solve the homicide, the murder, etc. And they're by themselves and they're breaking all the rules, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, well, they'd be going to prison if they're breaking all the rules. We have a constitution. They have bosses. They have other, co-workers, et cetera. That's another thing. Most detectives don't have the luxury of just working on one case. You're juggling multiple cases. Most detectives, well, everybody on the department has a boss that they have to answer to. And this whole idea of, you're a lone wolf and, the boss says something, of course you don't listen to them. Of course, you just totally blow them off or whatever. That's not the way it is. And probably some of the other big ones are guns. Guns run out of bullets. They just don't keep on shooting. And, either they're acting like it's about to blow out of their hands, and I'm like, well, that gun really doesn't have that much of a kickback. It wouldn't be that, dramatic. And people getting shot, with like, say, a 9mm, and they're being thrown back 20 feet. Yes. That never happens. I mean, you crumble when you're shot. You don't go backwards, unless it's a bazooka or something, I guess, or if a mortar hits you in the chest, from 10 feet away. Yeah, that might do it. But yeah, just like a pistol round or even a rifle round, like, you crumble, you don't get thrown. So the way they depict, gunfights is incredibly unrealistic. Of course, fights in general are incredibly unrealistic. You have a 5'1" female cop that weighs 100 pounds that's taking on Andre the Giant, and she takes him down with like one well-placed karate kick or something, and I'm like, no, that doesn't happen at all. That's fantasy. And another big one is how they handle interrogations of prisoners. Either they're overdoing it or underdoing it. When I put handcuffs on hundreds and hundreds of people through my career, not once would I say, you're under arrest for the murder of John Doe, blah, 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 blah. No, it's put your hands behind your back. You try to make it as non-confrontational as possible, because that's when some of the biggest fights happen, is when dude knows he's going to jail. So you try to blow it off almost. It's like, hey, dude, yeah, you got to come with me tonight. It's not as bad as it sounds, blah, blah, blah. Not the stoic, hey, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. You don't Mirandize people until you're interrogating them. You don't have to. Miranda is for somebody who is A, in custody, they're not free to leave, and B, you're asking specific questions about a crime. So that gets screwed up all the time. My wife loved, I think it was either Chicago PD or Hawaii 5-0, the new one. And there's this detective, and she's got her gun in this guy's mouth while she's interrogating this guy. He's like, talk. And I'm looking at my wife, and it's like, he can't talk. He's got a gun in his mouth. How is he supposed to talk? Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, first of all, you never going into an interview room, interrogation room, armed. Never. That does not happen. You don't do that. So I see Hollywood screwing that up all the time. And just starting out and screaming at people, you'll never get any kind of confession out of them. And the last thing to remember is almost every one of these rooms are being, video and audio recorded. So if you're, slapping people around, doing this, you're going to prison. You're going to go to prison. You're going to lose your job, lose your pension, and go to prison. But I guess, a good detective that gets a great confession out of somebody, that takes hours and hours. So, hey, it's Hollywood. You got to speed it up, I guess.
I mean, it's Hollywood. You have to Hollywood. It is what we call it a lot with the military movies, especially too. It's like if you look at Lone Survivor and the fall down the two falls down the mountains when they're sliding down the shale rock and they're slamming into trees and then they get up and walk. Humans won't be able to do that. Normal humans wouldn't be able to do that. But yet they were able to do it. And I had to explain it. I said it's a movie. The rest of the story is what you got to listen to. The story, not the movieism.
Right.
That part there is definitely not. That didn't happen. There's no way that happened. And those dudes stood up and walked away and were able to fire and hit targets without flinching at that point.
Yes. And yeah, and one more thing I'll throw in there too is, hey, cops are humans,
Yes.
with all their frailties and all their strengths. And, you know, either you have the cop that's on the edge, that's crazy, like Lethal Weapon, like Merton Riggs, it's like,
Yes.
okay, he's on the edge, he's suicidal. Or you have the stoic, that has no sense of humor whatsoever and is nothing but business. And if you're like that, you will literally lose your mind. You can't be like that.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's in every profession. It's not just in the police work. It's in every profession you go into, and people are you have yin and yang on whoever you're with, and like Murtaugh and Riggs, that's a great example. Is actually
Yeah.
because Riggs was batshit crazy, and Murtaugh wanted to retire. So, and
Right.
over
Yeah. He was the
time,
family guy.
he was a
He was the
family
guy.
guy. This
Yep.
is my last day. I'm too old for
Yep.
this. I'm too old for this. And every episode, every movie, I'm too old for this. And but he kept going. He
Yep.
kept staying because he wanted to be with. Somehow he wanted to be with Riggs, and Riggs really needed him to keep moving forward. Did you see guys like that as your partner when you were coming through the police force? Either side of that?
Um, you know, my first partner was a female, and she just got done coming back from maternity leave, and we were both in the same boat because I had a young child at home as well. That was actually a little bit younger than her youngest. So both of us worked midnight to 8, and both of us were zombies. I
Wow.
mean, we didn't sleep. We did not sleep. We were walking zombies. I mean, we took care of business. We did what we had to do, and I absolutely loved working with her. But we both knew it's like, hey, it's like if we could get off on time, we're gonna try, because that's the goal now. We're trying to get a couple of hours of sleep before you got to do kids stuff, etc. Yeah, and then so that was a great match. And that's another thing that's a misconception. You know, you might have a great partner, but nothing is forever on that job. There's job transfers, there's changing of shifts, there's promotions, there's all kinds of stuff. And especially in a bigger city, like I said before, nothing is forever. And then, I was partnered up with a guy that was heavily into rugby. Rugby was everything to that guy. And he almost looked like me. We both looked like fire plugs. It was kind of funny, and we worked really well. He was first generation American as well, so he had that immigrant mentality that I had as well, and that worked really well. Then I'm trying to think. I had another partner that wanted to be a firefighter real bad, and he went off to the fire academy, but he broke his leg, so he wound up going back to the cop side. So I wasn't with him a terrible long amount of time. And then I had another one, and then I got promoted. So once you're promoted to sergeant, you do have partners. Like, say I was on late shift when I got promoted. I got sent to District 2 late shift, and there was 4 other sergeants that I worked with. So you consider them partners. You have to work together because there's only 5 of you. So, but most of the time you're not riding in the squad together. Whereas before I was used to, if I had a partner, they'd be sitting next to me. So that was a little bit different to, get used to as well. And in slower districts, there'd be 1-person cars. And unfortunately, throughout the country, I see that as a trend because it just comes down to math. There isn't that many cops anymore.
Right.
And
No, like
not only is it a lot safer to have a partner for obvious reasons, but it's also a sounding board. It's like, okay, you're getting sent to the man with a gun at 12th and Concordia. All right, I what do you think? Should we approach from the south? Hey, there's that open field over there. You can talk about it on the way. Or if you saw something pretty horrific or something's bothering you, even that has nothing to do with work, you have a sounding board sitting next to you. It's like, yeah, my old lady's driving me nuts. I'm not getting any sleep. She's crawling up my ass because of X, Y, and Z. This is not going well. But at least I had somebody to talk to. And I don't see that happening as much anymore for the cops. That makes me sad.
I think you're right. It comes down to a sheer math thing. Numbers of men and
Yes.
women who want to wear the badge and do the job. I mean, I know here a lot of the police officers, both city and county sheriffs here, they take their cars home. So it's each car is one human in the car. And
Right.
when an incident happens, it looks like it's a huge incident because say 10 cars arrive, but that's only 10 people. In the old
Yes.
days, that was 5 cars, 10 people, or something
Yes.
like that. And
Absolutely.
now, since every car is at a house, and that person, as soon as he starts his car, and I guess turns on the computer in the dash there, that's how they punch into work now. There's no like roll call and stuff like that's how they do the roll call as they go in, unless there is some
Yeah.
kind of meeting. So it's kind of weird now.
It depends on the municipality or the county. Like state patrol has always been that way for at least in Wisconsin it has where you have a take home car and they've always been one man and they start their shift by turning on their computer in their driveway and it's like okay now they're available for calls.
Right.
That kind of thing. And every now and then they have to go in to do X, Y, or Z. But in bigger cities like Milwaukee, Chicago, New York, you have to go to roll call. Nobody's got a take home car except for maybe command staff might have something like that because, again, numbers,
Sheer math.
they're physically not able to do it. Yeah, they can't. But, you have a roll call just like what you'd see on TV from Hill Street Blues. And for me, that was our roll calls were 12 minutes. And that was my 12 minutes to get whatever important information I had to get out and also to try and get a laugh out of them.
Right.
If they could leave roll call with a smile on their face, because I know they're going to be bombarded with BS for the next 8 to 10 hours. If I can make their lives a little bit happier, a little bit funnier, I would try.
And then you probably felt like you did your job that day to help your guys get out there and do their job and come home at night. And that's probably
Absolutely.
improvement right
That
there.
job one. That's right. Come home the same same shape you were when you got to work.
Yeah. Walk in, walk out. That's how you want to do it. Not
Yep.
walk in, lay down, out. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So do you see police efforts now as being a lot harder than when you first started?
As far as efforts go, what do you mean?
As enforcing laws and doing things, doing the day-to-day grind like you did, coming up any kind of a approach to a maybe a alleged suspect or maybe a ticket, a traffic violation. Do you see it harder now than it was back 15 years ago?
From my point of view, yes. But I remember when I first started, there were guys on day shift that fought in the Vietnam War. I
Wow.
started in 95. There were some old timers there that were still there that were Marines from Vietnam that were about as crusty and hardcore as you could get. And
I
I
bet.
loved them. I loved talking to those guys. They were hilarious. My captain was a Marine and he was in Vietnam. There was no BS in that guy. It just, he was one of the best commanders I ever, and most of them were like, man, this is the worst time ever, kid. I can't believe you want to be a cop. Go get a job, do something else. This is complete bullshit. They won't let us do our jobs anymore, blah, blah, blah. That was 30 years ago. So you don't miss what you never had.
Right.
For me to start out after having 25 years under my belt and like starting out fresh now, I don't know if I could. Because now there's squad cameras, there's body cameras. We didn't have those when I first started. And the body cameras, I am a fan of because it has cleared more cops than has hurt them all day long. Because, now all of a sudden, it's part of my job of being a sergeant was, it's like you could go to the front counter and say, hey, Officer O'Donnell pulled me over. He called me X, Y, and Z. Oh, okay. Well, this is easy to fix. He was wearing a squad camera. I mean, a body camera. Let me go review it. Do you want to come review it with me? I'd be more than happy to show you. And then their faces turn beet red because they're lying. 99% of the people, they're pissed off because they got a ticket or their son got arrested or they got arrested a week ago. It's like, they're all salty. So they're going to make some shit up. And it's like, hey, perfect. I've got a body camera. Let's roll. This is awesome. I'll have this up in 5 minutes. And well, maybe it didn't happen exactly. Like, oh, okay, gotcha. You have a nice day. Bye. So that way, everything is done on computers now. Obviously, when I first started, all of our reports were handwritten with carbon paper, using about a gallon of whiteout or pink out or green out, because we had different shade, different color for different reports.
Right.
And you're literally just writing and writing. My handwriting is atrocious, so I was just like, oh my god. So yeah, things have changed quite a bit. Some for the better. It makes more sense to have this stuff on computers, instead of my bad handwriting trying to decipher my hieroglyphics. It's a whole lot better to have it typed out. That's for
Should have been
sure.
a doctor.
And yeah, exactly. That's what the nun said while I was in school.
I was too.
I hope you become a doctor, Patrick. I hope you become a doctor, because I can't read your handwriting. Well, like, yes, Sister Teresa. Okay, whatever. But
I'll do my best, sister.
But now, exactly. But it's so different now, where you're fighting with somebody where maybe in the past strangers would try to help out the police. Now they're not going to help you. They're just going to film you.
Yep.
Everybody's got a camera. So and this was very prevalent towards the middle to end of my career. And when I was given a roll call, if there was an embarrassing situation that happened, it was on the news that night or whatever, it's like, hey guys, everything you do out there, whether you see a camera or not, is being recorded. And if you act like that and you have that in the back of your head, you'll be just fine. Just be professional.
Definitely. And when you started writing, did you kind of combine or either part, like your early years with the pen jamming and the whiteout?
Oh yeah,
or
absolutely.
Have you moved forward now to the more modern stuff?
Well, when the series before the series that I'm about to release, yes. I started, with, the first book was field training. It's like, okay, it takes a cop like through field training. And my wife was laughing at me, when she read the book. She says, oh my God, you sound so much like a cop. It's like, oh yeah, you're describing people. It's like, okay, he was a white male, 5'9", 36 years of age, but you got to tone that down. So the subsequent books I did, it's like, all right. But yeah, it's a part of you, and that was my experience. So
Right.
if there's a copper that's going to retire in 20 years from now, who knows what they're going to have? Maybe they have some AI or augmented reality headset or something.
Yes.
Who freaking knows? Or they'll have a droid next to them or something, a computer, a robot. I mean, I don't know.
As they're driving, they'll send a drone up to tell them which way to go. Yeah, it's gonna be amazing next few years.
Yes, it's a brave new world, mister. It sure is.
And you can definitely write about all that right now as you are writing as a police expert. Basically, you can write from the past into the future without really skipping a beat, just knowing that science is taking over most of the job.
Right. And I'll add one thing. I think that crime writers, and this is one of the major reasons why, I do the consulting and I want to help out writers, is people actually believe what you write is exactly how things happen. They see it in a movie, or they see it on TV, or they read it in a book and they think, well, of course they should be able to get a fingerprint off that rock. Of course they should be able to, they should be able to shoot that guy in his pinky finger, and then the gun will fly away and everybody is going to hug afterwards, etc. That's doing a disservice to the community. I'd much rather what I write is 100%, spot on as far as what actually happens. And, take it with a grain of salt, take it however you want it, but that's the way it is.
Tell us a little more about your podcast, Cops and Riders. When you started that, what was your What was your motivation to start it, and how's it going now?
It's going well. It's funny because the reason why I started the podcast was first, I was trying to get booked on podcasts like what you have right now to promote the books.
Right.
So I'm different podcasts. And I'm thinking to myself, I could do this. It'd be one gigantic, advertisement for myself, and I'm not nervous behind a microphone. My brother was a disc jockey and I would DJ with him sometimes.
Wow.
So in my younger years, and I'm like, hey, this is fun. I have this at all. It's a lot of work. And at first it was just to advertise and promote my work. Then before I know it, I'm talking to Jack Carr, and I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. It's like, it was just like one thing led to another. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm doing pretty good.
That's awesome. And besides Jack Carr, have you had a lot of up and comers come on there, or a lot of a hodgepodge of everybody?
It's a hodgepodge. I have authors that are in my boat that I would call mid-listers that you probably haven't heard of, but they're doing really well, actually. I mean, I've had some authors on there that, and almost all of them are indie authors. They're self-published, and they're making way over 6-figure. I've had 7-figure authors on my podcast.
Wow.
And but there's one common theme to all of it, and they work really hard, and they're very smart. And you add all that together, and you can do some good stuff. There's no doubt about it. So yeah, I've had beginners on. I've had the kind of middle of the roads, and then I've had the ones that are New York Times, USA bestsellers that are making a whole boatload of cash.
That's awesome. I'm happy for you, happy for cops and writers, and it helps all of us as podcasters to know that there's awesome things going on around us, and it'll feed back to all of us.
Yeah, I think that podcast teenage years right now. It's not in its infancy, and they're not it's not its adolescence. I think it's like teenage. I don't think it certainly hasn't peaked. I think,
No.
I don't know what the exact numbers are, but man, there's a ton of podcasts, and this is the new frontier.
And I think it takes out a lot of the walls that were up before for guys like you who were indie young authors or new authors to get in front of other people, and it takes down those walls. So it's awesome.
I think it does away with the gatekeepers.
Yep.
And the same thing with publishing, but that just makes you want to do as professional of a job as possible and do as good as you can, because you don't want to like, yeah, that guy's whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, he's really good. He's got it going on.
Definitely. Patrick, we've hit a lot of your career, a lot of your things that you're doing now. What we do here on the Misfit Nation, as we get towards the end of the show, we ask our guest to give three things that anyone in our audience can do tomorrow to be better at what you do now. So if they want to become a writer and they want to start tomorrow, what should they start doing tomorrow? What 3 things should they start tomorrow?
Well, I'm a huge fan of the saying, dig the well before you're thirsty. You kind of have to look past your nose. For me, and if you have veterans that are listening to this, or active duty cops or military personnel, there's an end date, and most of us know what that end date is. So don't wake up a day before your 25 years thinking, oh shit, now what? It's like, so I started doing the writing thing. I started doing the podcasting thing, after the year mark. And I was kind of doing it on the down low. That's why I did it under pen names, etc., because I would have to get everything approved. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go through all that. So, and I was towards the end, by the time the internal would come around and the discipline would come around, I'd already be gone out the door. So it didn't matter to me. So my advice is, as far as specifically for writing, one of the biggest things you could do is read and read in the genres that you're interested in writing. I mean, some people, and you don't have to have a master in fine arts. You don't need your MFA to be a good writer. All you need is a good story, and just start writing. Make it a habit. Even if, I know people that write like 200, 500, 1,000 words a day. Most good writers do that. And it's a muscle. And if keep on flexing that muscle and work it, and, never stop learning. I guess that would be my second thing is, there's so much to learn about this. And again, you're going to learn by reading other people's work. And yeah, those would be my main thoughts as far as to be a writer. Read a lot, learn, and just keep on chugging, keep on practicing. And just so you know, your first book is probably you're not going to knock it out of the park, most likely. I hope you do. I hope you sell 1 million copies, but your first effort usually is not your most sterling effort, that you're the most proud of.
Right. And be prepared for that as well. Understand that if you do, if you hit a home run on the first pitch, awesome. But if you don't, realize that there are a lot of ground balls in baseball. There's a lot of ground balls in writing. You're gonna hit those ground balls.
And another thing to remember too is you got to have a hard, kind of crusty exterior, because there's a whole lot of haters, and you're going to be surprised if you start tasting some success. You will be surprised at the people that you thought were your friends or thought, whatever, that are going to be kind of mean-spirited towards you. And you're like, wow, where did that come from? So there might be a little bit of jealousy. Most people say, yeah, I've got a book in me. I'm going to write this book. Almost nobody ever pulls that trigger. So even if you decide to write whatever, you have nothing but my respect, because you're literally putting yourself out there. And you're putting yourself out there to all kinds of jabs and hooks and right crosses or whatever. So be prepared for that.
Just got to keep bobbing and weaving as you go through it. So
absolutely, but strong. Just keep pushing forward. Yes. And I guess the third last thing, and it's not just writing, but in life itself, it's like never miss an opportunity to make somebody's day. It's a very simple thing. And, I wish more people thought like that. And that could be just, helping somebody, it's like, hey, I'm stuck with this. If you're at a certain level and there's somebody below you that's asking you for help, if you can, give them a hand, help them, because you were in that person's shoes. I guarantee it. And I would never get as far as I have with this unless people that know a lot more about this business and are a lot smarter than me when it comes to this, that actually took me off to the side and say, hey, Pat, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I wouldn't have thought of that because I don't have the experience or the know-how. So, and you know what? It could also be as small as like, hey, open a door for, the lady that you don't know at the grocery store or whatever. Just be a nice person.
Just be a good human. Yes. Just try that out.
Absolutely.
Patrick,
give it a whirl. Take it out for a spin.
What's the best way for the audience to get in contact with you if they want to chat with you and just get some of your knowledge, or maybe have you on their show as well? Because a lot of our audience has their own shows as well.
Yeah, I'd love that. Copsandwriters.com is the website. I have links to all my socials on there and the books. And my email is sarge@copsandwriters.com.
All right, Sarge. I'll put that in the chat as well.
Excellent.
All right, it's in there. Patrick, this has been awesome. Great. I mean, the hour flew by. It was awesome chatting with you. Yeah, it did. We got to chat about 10 minutes before and then another 58 minutes now. So this is awesome. I wish you nothing but success. And it's been great hearing your journey from being a beat police officer to a sergeant to leading your guys to now becoming a writer, podcast host, and consultant along the way. It's an awesome journey. I can't wait to see what you do next.
Well, all I got to say is thank you, and thanks to your audience as well. And I forgot to mention, I have a big soft spot for our military personnel. My oldest boy was in the Army for 8 years. He was 5 years active. He did 2 different tours, one in Iraq and one on the border. He was a Cav Scout and then infantry. So, yeah, he was in the thick of it. And like I said, I've got nothing but love and respect for our military people.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much, Patrick. Have a good night.
All right. Good night.
This message is from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Did you serve in the military? If so, you can obtain a free lifetime pass to more than 2,000 federal recreation sites. These sites are located across more than 400 million acres of public lands, including national parks, wildlife refuges, and forests. The lands host activities to fit any lifestyle: hiking, biking, fishing, camping, and much more. Gold Star families are also eligible for these free lifetime passes. Plus, they cover entrance fees for a driver and all passengers in a car.
Thanks for checking us out and being a part of the Misfit Nation show. Don't forget to visit our website at themisfitnation.com. That's themisfitnation.com. Check out all our past episodes and get some of the great Misfit Nation gear for you and your family. As always, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling, because we are
Misfit Nation. Misfit Nation.